listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. Today I've got a very, very special guest on the show to talk about Eberechi Eze. I'm joined by Ollie Thomas, Crystal Palace content creator, season ticket holder, and all-round Palace fanboy. Ollie, thanks for joining the show. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for not introducing me as a closet Arsenal fan. I was ready for that. That's my main label. I am a Palace fan. Got the shirt on just to prove it today.
Yeah, well, it's one of those I've followed you for quite some time because you are quite kind to Arsenal on the socials and definitely have that warmer approach to us than some other London football fans. But yeah, I just wanted to pick your brains on Eze. You are obviously the expert on this topic, given that you watch him every week. And I first wanted to ask you about the fee received because Palace fans have been very positive in Eze moving on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Arsenal coming in for him was actually a really good outcome for us. With all due respect to Spurs, not that Arsenal fans will care on an Arsenal podcast, but it didn't really fulfill me seeing him go to Spurs. And although he would have been the main guy there, it felt like he could have done better than that. And it also felt like we could have done better than that in terms of the fee that we received. I think Arsenal coming in, paying effectively his release clause, and him going to, one of the biggest teams in the world is a nice outcome for us. Like, obviously you don't want to see your best players leave ever, but we bought Eze for £15 million, got 5 years out of him. He scored the winning goal in the FA Cup final. Then we sold him for, an all-in package of just under 70 million. You can't really ask for much more than that. So I think he definitely goes with Palace fans' blessing, partly because we feel satisfied with what we've got now, obviously assuming we reinvest the money, which I think we will before the end of the window.
Yeah, and the fee, 67 million all in with add-ons included. I'm perfectly fine with that fee as an Arsenal fan. And I think it's one of those where all three parties win. Eze gets his big move to his boyhood club, Arsenal get a star player, and Palace get a great fee that allows you to reinvest, and you've got 5 good years out of him. But in your video, you talked about him staying at Palace for 5 years. He's been extremely highly rated for a long time. Talk to me about why he stayed at Palace for so long and what kind of star qualities he would also bring to Arsenal.
It's a good question about why he stayed for so long. I think often when he was at Palace, the focus might have been on other attacking players. I think when he joined, obviously we had Zaha, and he he had quite a bad injury in his first season. So his first season was really good. He got an England call up, then ruptured his Achilles the same day in training. So that then kind of, stunted his growth for basically a year. And then the year after that, he was still kind of getting to the rhythm. I think you can look at kind of the end of the 22-23 season as to like when he started to really find his feet again. But by that point, like I think he was probably too expensive for anyone who wanted to buy him. He was still very young at that point, and we would have been buying potential, really. I think 23-24, the focus was on Elise, who once we sold him, we were never going to sell Eze too, I don't think. And he signed a new contract that season as well. And then last season was his most productive in terms of output. I think one myth isn't actually true. There was a kind of a theory, a feeling amongst Palace fans that Eze tended to go missing in big games, and when we needed him to take on the mantle attacking wise, he wasn't there. And the start of the 24-25 season, he started it really slowly. I think he scored early on against Chelsea. I think he scored 1 goal in the following 23 games. But then obviously at the end of the season, he produced massive moments in the quarterfinal, the semi-final, and the final of the cup. And I think that kind of boxed off the final concern that Palace fans at least had, and I imagine maybe scouts had too, of when the pressure is really on him and he's got to deliver, at Wembley in front of 80,000 people, can he actually do it? And he showed that he can do it. So I think it felt like he kind of took that final step in his final months at Palace. And I think at the end of the season, the general feeling was when Arsenal links came about and Spurs links came about, it felt to me like it was inevitable he would leave. So it's sad, but he's progressed so much in that time. He's changed a lot as a player, I think, actually.
Yeah, and he's really loved, not just for his footballing ability, but for everything else beyond that. Talk to me a bit about that.
He's just a really nice person, a very humble person. I think the setbacks early in his career have, he's had to work hard and be mentally quite resilient, but it's kept him grounded. And he's always done a lot of community work at Palace. I think if you go just, from a anecdotal standpoint, if you go on Palace's YouTube and you go on any community stuff we've done, whether it's with Palace for Life or anyone else, like the youth programs we're associated with, Eze is always there. He's always involved. He has his own foundation, obviously, of course, which he just does with his brother, I think, just off their own back. And he's just a very likable person. I think that's why part of the reason why Arsenal fans are so excited about signing him, and you see a lot of hype about Eze, is because he's just a nice person, and unfortunately they're semi-rare in football nowadays. He's kind of someone you're always rooting for, and I think Palace fans will continue to root for him even when he plays for Arsenal, to be honest.
That's good to hear. And interestingly, one of the things is where Eze is going to play. That's something that keeps being discussed. Arsenal's left-hand side needs a big upgrade this season. But Eze isn't a touchline winger, so opt to put this graphic out, and it was kind of Arsenal's predicted 11. And Eze very much on the left-hand side in this, but we know that's not really where he's been used at Palace. I've got a picture of Palace's 3-4-2-1 up here, the way you've played under Glasner. And this is a very good representation of how you line up with Eze and Sarr kind of in behind Mateta. And the two wide fullbacks, you can see Wharton in there, very much the orchestrator in midfield. But what was interesting is Eze's touches and his heat maps. So his heat map is something I've shared in a previous graphic. He does tend to get his touches wide in the middle of the park. But if you're looking for a winger that gets his touches on the right out, getting chalk on his boots higher up the park, Eze's not going to be that player. He likes to start wide and move in. And that's reflected in the zones that he touches the ball. Again, highest percentage of touches on the wing, kind of at the edge of the Palace half. And then where he's most involved in the attacking third is in and around kind of the final third, half space, in zone 14, and playing more as a 10. So talk to me about this, because this is something that I think is going to be a cause for debate as the season goes on. And also some people think, is he here to replace Martin Odegaard? But that was something that you thought he wouldn't do.
No, it's interesting where Eze fits in, right? And before the talk really intensified of him joining Arsenal, I'd said that I think Eze would be a really good addition to Arsenal, but as like a versatile attacker who can play on the left, but would probably prefer to play as like a left 8, right? Because those are roughly the same areas that he's occupied for Palace. He does naturally drift out to the left 100%. Like that's not up for debate. And you're right, he starts quite wide when out of possession, and like often that touch map is very representative of where he likes to get the ball around the halfway line. But when teams are sitting in, Eze always drifts inside, I think for two reasons. Partly because he likes to shoot and he's very good at shooting from outside the box, and he would be wasted out wide. So maybe it remains to be seen how much of that is manager instruction as opposed to his own natural tendencies. But the way Eze beats people is he doesn't have like a quick acceleration. Like he can't really stand up a fullback and then just like do a couple of step overs and go past them. That's not how he beats people. He beats people. He glides with the ball, and he needs space in order to do that. And in transition, for example, he's brilliant because he's so good at like committing defenders one way and going the other. But if a team is sat in, and often it's for a team like Arsenal, if they're going to side, and you need your winger to go and stand up a fullback and beat him and get a cross in, that is not what Eze is necessarily good at. That doesn't mean he can't work in that system. But one thing I think is important, and it's interesting, in that first 11 graph you showed, it had Lewis Skelly as the left back. I worry about Lewis Skelly and Eze as a combination, because I think he needs an overlapping fullback if he's going to play on the left. And if Lewis Skelly or Calafiore is going to do that, that's fine. I don't think Eze should be the one who's in charge of holding the width and, as you said, being a touchline winger in the final third, because that's not what he's best at. It seems like to me Arsenal would have to tweak their system in order to accommodate Eze. I think that's fine to do. I'm not sure whether they would do that. But I understand from what I hear, Arsenal are slightly changing the way they're playing this season. And if that happens, and if you can get Eze in that like left half space in the final third, he's absolutely devastating. Like he offers Arsenal something which they obviously Martinelli or Trossard don't have, which is just someone who can produce a moment to win a game like that. So I think if you can accommodate that strength of his, then it will work. But how Arsenal set up will be interesting to see.
Yeah, I do see this as a pairing if he's playing on the left wing where he thrives with someone like Calafiori. I also think Gyökeres is a player that does like to go left and run the channels.
Mhm.
That gives Eze a chance to come into the half space where he really loves threatening. And I've got this graphic here. This is Palace on the transition against Spurs last season. And you can see it's Eze coming in to that left half space, coming central, and he's got two runners ahead of him. This is something that we've seen at Arsenal a lot, where our decision making on the transition's been poor. We haven't had the players that are equipped to do that. And again, as a more central, where he's coming in this one against Fulham last season, and you can see Mateta, just a powerhouse runner, going through the middle and making that run. But the key question here is I know Eze can carry very easily. I know about his gliding, as you've mentioned, his ability to eat up space. But talk to me about his decision making in the final third, because that's ultimately what makes counterattacks effective.
I mean, like any attacker, it can be hit and miss. I think one thing, it's great to see how hyped Arsenal fans are about signing Eze. It does like just scare me a little bit because I know he has been inconsistent for us, and like again, it's so hard to talk about him. It's so hard to talk about him negatively because I love him, and I don't want to sound like I'm like playing this transfer down. But there is a reason he played for Palace for 5 years, and that's because he's not a perfect player. Even the first game of this season, there were 2 occasions where Palace had counter-attacking chances against Chelsea, and Eze decided to shoot from 40 yards. And look, he will do that sometimes. He'll take risks with the ball, which for Palace was often frustrating. But I think for Arsenal, that might be fitting because maybe not enough players do that. I think those 2 graphs you showed with him counter-attacking is really interesting, actually. Something I wanted to point out is how we used Eze towards the back end of last season. He was coming so inside a lot, so central, and Sarr would basically be alongside Mateta in terms of how we were. It almost looked like they were playing as a front 2 a lot of the time. Sarr was so narrow and so far forward. And then Munoz would provide the width down the right. So we effectively had 3 runners almost all the time down the right-hand side or through the middle via Mateta, Sarr, and Munoz. Again, I know Gyökeres, that would probably be music to the ears of Gyökeres, who makes those runs. And I think Eze will never, ever be afraid to find Gyökeres. He won't always do it. He's not like, I wouldn't describe Eze necessarily as a super efficient player. He's got a lot more efficient, but what he will do is he won't take the safe option. Like he will try and do something special. I think that's why he's sometimes quite a streaky player, is because when it's working for him, he looks like an absolute world beater. But like if it's not working for him, he can get frustrated, and it can be like he goes through waves. If you look at like his output, I think over the course of a season, there'll be periods where he's like on fire and then nothing will happen and then he'll be on fire. But hopefully having like better players around him will mean he has more space. And at Palace, he was the main man in attack. And even though Sarr and Mateta really like they contributed a lot last season, Eze was the focal point of most defenses, or focus point of most defenses. So having Saka on the other side, I think, and Odegaard will really free him up. And it'll be interesting to see actually, you know, what he chooses to do with that space, and if Arteta kind of limits his risk taking in that sense.
Yeah, well, you mentioned some of the streakiness, and some of that comes from being an off-the-cuff player as well.
Yeah.
Eze to me is kind of like a nonchalant, old-school baller. That number 10, I could imagine Eze with the socks down around his ankles, that kind of player back in the day. But he actually works pretty hard for the team as well.
Yeah.
I think Glasner's been an incredible coup for Palace. The way he's got players organised, and so with an Arteta team, you do have to work hard. You do have to deliver on the ball as well. But working hard out of possession is a big part of our game plan, because we win the ball high up the park and we do look for those high turnovers. But one of our issues has been turning high turnovers into shots and goals. With a player like Eze, he will have those shots. He will try and play that pass, as you mentioned. At the minute, we have players that will turn back. So, how do you think that will? Firstly, how do you work or rate his work rate and his positional discipline? And secondly, in terms of that ability to make quick decisions in the final third and just take that risk, where would you put him and who would you compare him to?
It's a good question. I mean, it's the same with Glasner, that you have to be willing to work hard. I don't think we press quite as high as Arsenal would against a team, but Eze does his defensive work. You know, he played 90 minutes in the FA Cup final against City, where we barely had the ball. And one thing he did really well in that game actually was relieve pressure, which again, I don't know how maybe relevant that is to Arsenal when you're having, you're dominating a lot of games, but he's very calm. Like when we win the ball back, what he won't do is he definitely won't panic and won't go down cul-de-sacs. He will he'll take a bit of time. It happened a few times where he kind of just like drifted past De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva as they were like aggressively counter pressing him. But ultimately, it kind of depends which Eze turns up a lot of the time, and that is very Crystal Palace to have players like that, like Balassi, Zaha, similar mold of like sometimes you will get frustrated and go, why has he chosen to do that? And then other times he'll produce like an absolute moment of magic. I think sometimes at Palace he would often want to go himself, which is great, and you want an attacker to do that. Obviously, it could be frustrating. I imagine Arsenal he probably won't do that as much because you've got Saka, you've got Gyökeres, you've got Odegaard, who he probably trusts. With all due respect, he trusts a lot more to deliver moments than Sarr and Mateta. But he often will. But I like Palace fans did. Arsenal fans will sometimes get frustrated with him. Like it would be disingenuous of me to say that he was like the perfect player at Palace. There were long periods last season where Palace fans wanted him dropped. Just because he was going through these spells where nothing he was doing was kind of working. But that's, as you said, that's kind of the idea of a maverick player. Like sometimes things will just go for them and they will be incredible to watch, and other times that won't happen. And I think from the outside, often you'll look at a player and you'll only kind of think of the times it's worked really well, and people will have this incredible, like Balassi is a really good example of that. People think Balassi was like Ronaldo. Like he was obviously really fun to watch, but equally he was incredibly frustrating at times. But Eze, is not on the same level as that. But I do kind of want to like temper the expectations because I've seen some Arsenal fans on Twitter today, and I know this is a minority, suggesting that Eze would come in and be Arsenal's best attacker. Like that won't be the case. Like as someone who watched him for 5 years, he will not be Arsenal's best attacker. But what he will be is someone who can produce a moment out of nothing and will give Arsenal an unpredictability, which they've obviously not had on that side for a long time.
Yeah, I do see him as a level raiser despite that, just purely because we don't have a player like that. So all the things that you've mentioned are all things that we're lacking right now. And I do think you've made a really good point about the better players. I rate Sarr and Mateta very, very highly.
Yeah,
they are just two players. And you look behind Eze, and again, I rate Wharton extremely highly. But you look at the Palace team, and beyond that 11, you don't have the depth. Whereas if Eze's not playing well, Martinelli's there, Madueke's there, Trossard's in there. Even if he's going to play as an 8, he's competing with Declan Rice, Mikel Merino, and there is the opportunity to drop him. Do you think there's ever an element of when a player's guaranteed their place, they maybe try things that they wouldn't try whenever they're kind of knowing that they have to compete for their place on a Saturday?
Yeah, definitely. I think at Arsenal we'll see a different Eze in a good way. And like obviously, I loved Eze at Palace, but and that might manifest itself in being slightly more risk averse when he first joins. I think he'll need to be empowered to be the same player that he was. Also, last season, he was barely getting a rest, which I don't think helps. As we've seen now, he's left, and we played Justin Devaney as the left 10 in our Conference League playoff game on Thursday night. We didn't really have any backup for him, so sometimes I think he would I think we were managing minutes in his legs a lot of the time as well. And we spoke about pressing earlier. We probably asked him to do a little bit less of that just to make sure he was on the pitch and available. But I think like having competition, which he will have a lot of, I know, you said he's got basically 3 other players who can play in his position. He'll need to be on it. And I think that'll be good for him and it'll push him up to the next level. There's whether, we talk about his work rate or his decision making. One thing that he definitely has in abundance, and I think he has more than any of the players in the position he's competing with, is natural ability. And if there's one player who I could think of in Palace history where it's we need to win a game against someone, who do you want to have on the pitch? Eze is always that guy. He would never, ever, ever get taken off when we were chasing a game, ever, because why would you? He could be having the worst game of his life and he'd pop up with an unbelievable goal and you'd win the game. And that can be the difference, right? Between winning titles and not. I don't think Eze is going to do that on a consistent basis. I'm not going to sit there and be he's going to be the one that brings Arsenal the title home, because that's a pretty big ask. But I think playing for a better team will help him a lot.
Yeah, and his carries are something that I've mentioned already. I've talked about him on transition, but if you look at the number of chances that he created, again, this was a big weakness of ours. And we've talked about Mateta and Sarr. As he is getting that ball and carrying it into those two, and at Arsenal, you mentioned it yourself. He's got Odegaard, he's got Saka, Gyökeres. Depending on where he's playing, potentially a left winger ahead of him, or Declan Rice crashing the box from those deep positions. So when you've got a player that can make these carries, you've got someone that can really counteract mid blocks, which is something that Arsenal have struggled against. The narrative is Arsenal have really struggled against low blocks. Part of that's because we had so many injuries, but actually our biggest downfall was mid blocks because we just didn't have the carriers to really take us through them. But how would you rate Eze's technical quality in those moments? Because that's something, taking risks is great, but what's his security like on the ball? How calm is he whenever he makes it? You mentioned that he still kind of makes the right decision a lot of the time. His technique remains smooth, but he creates chances on the carry. And you've also mentioned his shooting quality. Again, these are two things that Arsenal have really, really lacked up until this season. So talk to me a bit about that.
I mean, his carrying ability is brilliant. Like anyone who's watched him could see he does that a lot, and he was. It's interesting actually when you've got thinking about Eze, Sarr, and Mateta as a trio is important because Sarr in particular is like he's obviously rapid in behind and very good at like crossing and finishing, but he is not good at beating a man at all. Eze was basically the only one in that front three who was capable of doing that, and we gave him that responsibility the whole time to be the one who could like bring the ball up the pitch and bring defenses out. And yeah, his in terms of like his composure, I can't think of a time Eze's like ever been flustered. Like he will not be phased at all if he loses the ball, or if he's got no option. Like he backs himself to just to go around the entire team, and if he can't, he will keep on going and going if he has to. As I said, he'll put the ball at risk, and in those mid blocks, like he won't be afraid to shoot. He won't be afraid to try and do an extra, like do something extra to unlock a defense, and that will be frustrating sometimes when it doesn't work. But having a risk taker in your team means that, you know, by definition, like sometimes it won't work out and sometimes he'll lose the ball and sometimes Arsenal will have to go back and defend on a counter attack, and that will happen. But as we've said, like Arsenal are such a well-drilled team. I think having someone who can be a bit frustrating but can produce that moment of magic will completely change them. And I think when you think of teams who are just like sat in like that and but still are not like totally in just like a bank of 10, but are pushing up a little bit more, Eze is perfect in that position because teams are afraid of him shooting. Like they know that he can shoot, they know he can score. I think he scored as many goals as anyone else from outside the box since the start of last season. And when you have like him on one side and then Odegaard and Saka on another side, and all three of those can shoot from range and have scored goals from range, it gives Arsenal a whole other dimension because Martinelli in particular, Trossard too, like teams aren't that afraid of them shooting from that far out. They're probably not anticipating that. Whereas Eze is so aggressive in those situations and he wants to score and he wants to play that killer pass. He wants to be the one that makes goals happen. And for a team like Arsenal, I think that's perfect in those situations.
Yeah, well, you've mentioned a couple of points that I really like. So, firstly, what you said about Eze, he's not the player that's going to win Arsenal the league in isolation. I completely agree with that. I think the whole kind of this is the player that wins you the league. That's a 20-year-old narrative that's completely changed. You need a big squad. You need multiple players, and this is a window where Arsenal have gone out and bought Zubimendi, Madueke, Gyökeres, and now Eze. That's an insane window, plus added depth right across the board. So it's a window I never expected to happen. But the other thing is, you said about aggression with trying to make things happen. I love that word because it's what we need in the final third. We've got players that are too timid when it comes to shooting. And with the exception of Saka and maybe Ethan Nwaneri, we've lacked that. We've now added Gyökeres, who loves a shot. Madueke is one of the highest shot volume players in the Premier League. And then you've got Eze. So in terms of his qualities, free kicks are one of them as well. So he's a player who can really add that kind of star quality in and around the box. And Declan Rice has hit a couple of free kicks. We are talking about 2 free kicks in his whole career. Before that, it was years before Arsenal had actually scored a free kick, with the exception of Saka's against PSG, which wasn't really a direct free kick. Eze has that set piece ability that we don't have, and he's got that shooting from outside the box. How highly do you rate this, and what do you think this will do to help elevate Arsenal in the final third?
I'm trying to think what other free kicks he scored for Palace because he scored one against Leeds, and I mean he's had 2 disallowed now on the opening days of the season. He's not like Beckham or Ward-Prowse, he will shoot, and like I think that the Chelsea one was a good example actually of like he's just such a clean striker of the ball, and even from a set piece heavy team like Arsenal, it just gives the team something else to think about, right? If they see Rice and Eze standing over a ball now, I think that's two routines that could possibly happen, and teams won't like that. I don't think he'll come in and take corners. Like, I can't think of many like vicious deliveries that he's had from set pieces, like in the same way that Rice or Saka does. But he's certainly like another option. Like, I know that I've obviously you said two free kicks in Rice's whole career. Eze has got a better history than that. And yeah, he can definitely offer that. It's just the clean ball striking. He's also scored like some different, like the three that I can think of. I said I know two of them were disallowed in the end. The Leeds one was his first goal for Palace. It was a proper like up and over the wall, in off the bar. Then the one against Chelsea was like smashed keeper's side. And then the one against Brentford opening day last season was, from like miles out. Keeper, they thought he was going to cross it, and he just whipped it in near post, and it was disallowed for nothing to do with the shot or the goalie or anything. It was ridiculous. He has a variety, and he had that responsibility at Palace, and he created chances from it. I don't think he's like when I think of what we'll miss at Palace, I don't think we will miss Eze set pieces necessarily, but he definitely was a threat from them.
Yeah, that's interesting to know, because I think that's been one of the things that has been built up, and I think just a little bit too high. But everything you've mentioned fills me with loads of confidence. I like the fact that he's a risk taker. I like the fact that he'll frustrate. Alexis Sanchez used to frustrate the Arsenal fan base because he was trying things, and a player that will keep going and going and going. And the other thing that I don't think people are appreciating is Arsenal finished the game against United with Saka, Havertz, Madueke, Odegaard, and Marino on the pitch, all left-footed players. So when you look at the attacking players, Eze is a much-needed right footer who will come in and shoot on his right foot, because Martinelli might come inside, but he's not a good ball striker. Trossard is a good finisher, but I wouldn't say a great ball striker, in the sense that he's not going to open his body and ping one in the top bins. Eze has all that in his locker, and he has just that stardust that I think gets people off their seats and really excited. But I think that's a good point to leave it. We've gone on a bit longer than expected, but a huge thanks for joining. Ollie, can you please tell everyone where they can find you? And I can vouch for you, it's not just all Palace content. It's worth our fans following it as well.
Talk CPFC, like all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube too. I actually did a video about Eze to Arsenal. So once you finish this one, go and watch that one as well.
So yeah, perfect. Well, huge thanks for joining. And if you've enjoyed the show, please drop a like, please hit subscribe, and please drop a comment and tell us what you think of Eze coming to Arsenal. Thank you again, and we will see you very soon.